Welcome to Conversations with Laurel, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McCargue, and today, as always, my fascinating guest is going to surprise you because we're going to talk about hypnosis. And let me tell you right now, you're going to be very interested. Robert Hughes,
Oh,
BCH, Bachelor, Board Certified Hypnotist. Welcome to
yes.
my show.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to tell our listeners how I met you. Our son was here with his dog, and we were babysitting our grand dog. And I took him to the dog park one day, and there you were with your awesome dog. And we got to talking, and you told me about this book that you wrote about work that you had done a while ago. And the book is called Hypnosis for Children with IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, and tummy aches, which I love the title. So we were talking about hypnosis and you gave me a copy of your book, which I devoured. Now in the inside cover, it says Advanced Hypnosis with Complementary Medicine.
Hmm.
Explain what that means to our listeners.
We hear a lot about alternative medicine,
Yeah.
and I don't view hypnosis as being an alternative to any kind of traditional medicine. Uh, my own recent experiences, uh, where I'm alive because of very good traditional medicine, uh, reveal my respect for it. Complementary medicine is um, things that complement traditional medicine. So I see hypnosis as something that, done correctly, is not an alternative to or a substitute for, but a complement to or an addition to traditional medicine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense to me, and it's complement rather than complimentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what got you interested in hypnotherapy,
And hypnosis.
hypnosis? Yeah.
Oh gosh, I've kind of lived a double life.
Oh,
I,
okay.
yeah, I had been practicing various forms of meditation, various martial arts, um, 30 some years worth. Um, um, I was training when I first moved to Boise in 1988. I ran into someone teaching a holistic touch or massage therapy internship and did that for 2 years. Um, and there I was working with one of my clients who all of a sudden spontaneously um, dissociated into three separate personalities.
Hmm.
And there I am doing, I was doing essentially acupressure work. And so I was very busily trying to rack my brains to figure out now what kind of acupressure points put people back together. And we got through the session. I kind of talked my way through it. But it reignited an interest I'd had in hypnosis since college. And um, I had the opportunity to do another 2 year internship in hypnotherapy. And at the time, I was a very gainfully employed hospital administrator. And after 2 years, I decided healthcare wasn't fun anymore, and hypnosis sounded a lot better. Uh, so I started a kind of a traditional hypnotherapy practice, helping people quit smoking, um, and lose weight were the primary things.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a month into starting my practice, a woman called from Pocatello, which is clear on the other side of the state from Boise, and said, my husband had a stroke and we were watching television and we saw a man who had a trumpet player who had a stroke and couldn't play the trumpet anymore until he was hypnotized. And then he practiced, then he played trumpet very well. And she said, do you think the doctors have said my husband has plateaued and won't get any better?
Okay.
Do you think hypnosis would help? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me look it up. And this is before the internet was a big deal.
Wow. You had to go to the
So,
library and get books.
yeah. And call every hypnotist I knew and have you ever worked with this? Most of the answers were no. But I said, what I do know is it can't hurt him.
Yeah.
And so let's give it a try. Well, he was a ranch hand on a dude ranch up in the Idaho wilderness, a hunting ranch that snowed in the wintertime for about 4 months.
Okay.
And in order to overwinter, he had to be able to climb the steps from his uh, in the barn up to the loft where their home was.
Wow.
And so I worked with him for several sessions. Did a bunch of things that I learned I shouldn't know anything about, like what amounted to occupational therapy with his hands and other kinds of things. By the time we were finished, Eldon was walking up those stairs and was able to overwinter. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so it was that sort of launched me into a whole different realm of complementary medicine
Okay.
because Eldon had seen and was seeing traditional doctors. I wasn't trying to replace them. I was trying to add to.
Yeah.
And it between all of us, we got Eldon past the point where the doctor said he was plateaued, and actually got him back to pretty substantial recovery. When he came to see me, his whole left side was frozen. His hand was cramped like this.
Mm.
By the time we left, his hand was flat. He could use it to pick up small things. As I said, he could walk upstairs on that. It was actually his left side, his left leg, um, and it was a pretty remarkable thing. From there, I just moved into following an interest in a lot of those kinds of um, sort of additional healing activities, maybe with a major focus on pain.
Okay.
So, along about 2007, I got a phone call from an office manager from one of the doctor's offices, a group of pediatric gastroenterologists. And she said, our docs have just been to a conference and they saw a paper presented in Amsterdam that said hypnosis is really effective at helping children with IBS.
Okay.
And she said, do you think you'd be interested in that? And I said, as was my wont, what I'd learned from Eldon is if somebody calls and says, can hypnosis help? Say yes, and then figure it out later. So I said, sure, send me the paper. And she sent me this paper that showed remarkable results. 90% remission in after, gosh, this is where I wish I had a copy of the book right in front of me. After 8
I have one.
sessions, I
I have
believe.
one.
You have it, yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very few sessions.
Wow.
And and they
Significant
had,
pain decrease and
yeah, well, pain decrease, bloating, gas, um, the whole gamut of cramping and diarrhea, constipation cycles, and all of that just cleared up.
wow.
Um, by then there was internet, so as I started looking it up, I found there'd been some mixed results with adults and almost nothing with children, except this very landmark paper.
Okay.
Well, it turns out that our docs had were kind of set up to work with me. One of them had gotten into medical school by getting over an intense test anxiety problem with the help of a hypnotist.
Okay.
Another in the group had his brother-in-law had come to me, and his brother-in-law was morbidly obese. His doctor told him that he couldn't have bariatric surgery unless he lost 50 pounds
Oh,
and got his liver enzyme numbers down to a safe level for surgery. So this fellow had worked with me, lost his 50 pounds, and got his liver numbers down. So the two of the three doctors in the clinic had very positive attitudes toward hypnosis, which is not at all common in
right.
medical circles. Um,
Right.
and so I really developed a program from scratch for them that included 2 to 4 sessions in office, listening to recordings every night, and uh, and found that my results were very similar to those in the paper. That my kids were getting better and staying better. And of
Yeah.
course, I only saw these kids after the doctors had already ruled out parasites and cancers and anything organic.
Yeah.
Um, and so I knew that I was getting a group of kids who were functionally ill, meaning that there was no identifiable organic cause.
Nothing a pill would cure.
Nothing a pill would cure, although some of the proton pumps, things like Zantac, protonics, those kinds of things, will help with some of the symptoms. And so these kids were mostly on some kind of medication, and fiber helps as well with symptoms. So the kids were on medication and fiber, but they were still having the symptoms. And this is not an uncommon thing. Um, Boise is a town. The service area is maybe back then was maybe 400 to 500,000 people,
Mhm.
so 200,000 children. Um, 80% of the practice that supported 3 physicians and 1 nurse practitioner were kids with irritable bowel or functional tummy ache.
Okay.
Out of 200,000 kids, they're supporting a pretty good sized clinic.
Yeah.
And so this is a pretty widespread problem. I think in the book, I, I'm racking my brain for
That's
numbers, but
right.
something like 20% of kids experience some degree of recurrent tummy ache, and about 5% of them experience it enough to miss significant amounts of school.
Ah,
So
yikes.
it's a pretty serious problem. And you're a teacher. You've probably seen those kids who um, act like they're in pain, maybe won't talk about it because what kid wants to talk about diarrhea and constipation and tummy ache, but it's a significant problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so as we integrated this into their practice, those kids did really well, and they started sending me kids with other kind of related problems. Like one I remember is a young man with celiac disease,
Yeah. I have
and
celiac.
you have celiac.
I
Well, this
do.
kid would not give up bread.
Oh.
So surprise, surprise.
And a while ago, there were
Yeah,
no good gluten-free breads. I can tell you that.
well,
It's
there still aren't, as far as I'm concerned.
they're getting there.
They're getting
Uh,
better, but he just he wouldn't consider it, and so they sent him to work with me on attitude change. Um, they sent other kids just who might not have a clear cut irritable bowel diagnosis, but they suspected some kind of functional pain going on.
all right, so back
And
up a minute. Back up a minute to the attitude issues
yeah,
with the celiac child.
yeah.
What happened with it? Was the attitude that he didn't want to give up bread, and that's what he was able to overcome?
Oh, he had lots of attitude.
Okay.
He didn't want to give up bread or anything containing gluten. Um, and I suspect he was probably a bit on the spectrum too. He
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. Oh
he
boy,
just
it
had a
is.
difficult time in life,
Yeah, yeah.
and um, and I'd like to say I was a smashing success with him, but the truth was, we made a little bit of headway, and that was about it.
A
Um,
little bit's
but
better than
a
nothing.
little bit's
So,
better than nothing.
yeah, yeah. So when I started, before I introduced you, I said you're getting very interested. So when we think of hypnosis, I think there are a lot of misperceptions, right? I think there are. What
Watch the watch.
talk about some common misperceptions for people who
Well,
are kind of like, oh, hypnosis is woo woo and it wouldn't work. Yeah. What?
yeah. For one, it's not an extraordinary state of mind. It is not some unusual state. Uh,
Okay.
Meditation is a synonym for hypnosis. Um, Imagination and visualization are states that are hypnosis like. That little floaty period that all of us experience between being fully asleep and fully awake, or between waking and falling fully asleep, is essentially a hypnotic state. If you look at the brain waves, they're doing the same things that the brain's doing when you're in hypnosis. Um,
Ooh.
so it's not unusual. It's a place that our minds go anyway. And in fact, there are some people who say that in order to learn anything, to get any information from short term memory to long term memory, we have to go into a kind of hypnosis like state. We have to be in a theta brainwave state. Um,
Is that why sometimes if you go to sleep with a problem in your head, you might wake up with a solution?
yes, absolutely. It's also, you probably heard in your pedagogy classes that it takes somewhere between 10 and 40 repetitions for kids to get something.
Yeah.
But you've also run across one trial learners. The one trial learners are the ones who essentially go into a receptive state and take it in, and it just lodges. Um, a place you wouldn't expect to find hypnosis, but it's actually what's going on, is watching coaches with athletic teams. Athletes are so much fun to work with because they are used to going into a receptive mind state when an authority figure talks, when the coach talks. And I even saw it one time with Michael Jordan, arguably the best basketball player in world history, talking to his coach on the sidelines, Phil Jackson. And as Jackson was talking, Michael's eyes dilated. And dilating eyes are a sign that someone's receptive to information and taking it in. And that's
Okay.
essentially a hypnotic state. Um,
So the misperception that people have is what?
is that it's unusual, and that, oh, and that if you're in hypnosis, somebody else is controlling you.
Right. Okay.
Um, the fact of the matter is, if you're in hypnosis, you may be more disposed to follow suggestions, but only if they're going in a way you want to go anyway. So when you see
Ah.
people do funny things at a hypnosis stage show, part of their unspoken contract is, hey, you, Mr. Hypnotist, keep me safe and don't truly humiliate me. And I'll go ahead and do some of those silly things, especially if you provide an excuse system where I can say, oh, it wasn't, I'd never do that. I only did it because you had me hypnotized. Favorite example, 16-year-old girl had just gotten her license. I'm at the fairground watching a stage show. I called it continuing education.
Yeah.
And the hypnotist has this girl in just a really nice hypnotic state and tells her that she's a race car driver, and she is steering away and shifting gears and making sounds, and then he tells her, uh, number 34 just hit your back bumper and spun you out of the race. And she spins around and comes to a stop, and he walks over, and then he acts like a news reporter and says, "This is Joe from Channel 7 News. Tell us what you think about number 34 now." And she does this.
Oh. And for those of you just
Okay.
listening, there
Yes,
was there was a bird. There was a bird involved.
there's a bird. Yes. Now, that 16-year-old girl has to be able to come down and say, I would never flip somebody off, especially mom and dad, not while driving your car to the supermarket. Now, the fact of the matter is, that's a part of her personality. And
Yeah.
under the right circumstances, she certainly would do that. But
Yeah.
she's got a kind of an excuse system, and she can say, and I only did it because he had me hypnotized.
Okay.
Well, no, the hypnosis kind of opened the gates and allowed you to be a little more free and creative, maybe than you would have, and maybe tamped down your inhibitions a bit. But no, honey, that was you.
More free and creative. I like
Yes.
that. I like that idea. So in the book, I found it really fascinating, your discussion about the vastness of the subconscious compared to the conscious mind. Talk a little bit about that because, I think we all just think that we're conscious when we're awake, right?
That this
Yeah.
chatter that we have going on up here is all there is to mind. Uh, the image hypnotists often use is of an iceberg,
Oh,
where 10% is above the water, 90% is below.
yeah.
The only problem with that image is it vastly understates the size of the subconscious mind.
Wow.
Um, some of the things that are happening in your subconscious mind is that this is just a minor part. It's storing all your memories now, and calling them up and down as you need to access them. If you had to carry all of your memories around live in your conscious mind,
Mm.
you'd have to have a very large truck to carry your head around. And that's just a small part of what it's doing. It's running your body. Your subconscious mind is directing the normal replacement and replication of your body's 30 trillion cells on a fairly predictable schedule. It's running, integrating your senses. When you go to the movie, for example, the picture on the screen and the sound are coming from different places. The light on the screen is entering your eyes at the speed of light, so almost instantaneously. The sound is traveling maybe 40 to 50 feet. Somehow your brain has to coordinate those two things so that the sound and the motion are in sync. Your subconscious mind is running all of that stuff in the background. Uh, your subconscious mind is storing all of your self image, whether that's your physical bodily self image, whether it's your beliefs about yourself. Um, and again, as a teacher, you've probably seen those kids who've come in with just no confidence, with a belief that they're stupid,
Yeah.
and there isn't much that you can do up on the surface to change that. It usually comes from a deeply ingrained pattern of being told that somehow they're not enough.
Mm.
Um, and not just verbally told, but physically told, um, through gestures, through all the myriad ways we communicate.
Yeah.
And I said in the book that below the age of 10, we're in a pretty constant hypnotic state.
Oh, yeah,
Between
yeah. I
between the
wrote that
ages of
down.
0 and 5, yeah,
Yeah,
we are
you said you had an unproven hypothesis that up to the age of 10, children are in a state of waking hypnosis most of the time.
most of the time.
So,
And
yeah.
under the age of 5, just replace that with all the time.
Okay. All
And
right.
they
So
are
up,
they are
yeah.
incredible learning machines.
Sponges, yeah.
Yeah, when a child is, say, 3, they're learning an average of 5 new words a day. If they're verbs, they're learning how to conjugate them at the same time. They're learning how those words fit together with all the other words they already know into sentences. They are learning, they are doing incredible first trial learning, or maybe second trial for those who are on the slow side. By the time they get into school, and you're being told as a teacher that they need 10 to 40 repetitions to learn 2 plus 2 equals 4, um, something has slipped in there. And what's slipped is somehow they've taken on the idea internally and stored it in the subconscious mind where it's operating kind of out of sight that, gee, I just can't get this.
Ah.
Uh, or
They
think
have
about,
they have more of a an idea of themselves as independent things, beings, machines, and maybe they question their
well,
abilities.
once an idea lodges in the subconscious mind, your mind acts on that idea as if it's true
Okay.
until sufficient sufficient energy gets in and sufficient access gets in to change that idea. Um, think about all the girls you saw who thought they were no good at math. Uh, that is not something that is wired into male or female brains. what is wired in is a prejudice in our society against girls knowing math, and they come to school loaded up with that idea that math is scary, math is impossible, math is for boys. Stick with your dolls, and that is not something that's operating on the surface of the mind. It's operating well below the surface, um, and it's to change that. You have to lower the level of attention, which is really what hypnosis is. It's lowering our level of attention into what's normally subconscious, so that we can deal with it. And
Okay.
in that state, there are a mountain of things you can do, depending on the creativity and the imagination of the hypnotherapist.
Eh,
Um,
so to talk about how you use imagination and creativity in a session, like how would that work?
okay. Um,
I think you
One,
have a control room um,
right,
metaphor in
with
there. Yeah.
with kids, I'll talk about that one, but I have another favorite one as well.
Okay.
With the control room, which is a metaphor, the kids are in a very nice, deep receptive state. I ask them to imagine a control room in their brain. And that control room has levers and buttons and dials and lights and all kinds of control apparatus, computer screens, wheels, anything they can imagine. And that control room is where all of their body's functions are controlled.
Okay.
Then I'll tell them, now imagine that in your lower intestine, there's several lights, red and green lights. If a light's red, it means something's wrong. If a light's green, it means everything's operating normally. Now, somehow, the automatic pilot on your control room got set with a bunch of red lights on. So, what I want you to do is turn the automatic pilot off and now go to each control for a light and change the control, lift the lever, turn the button or the dial, push the button, do whatever it takes until the light turns green. And we go through and do that for all the red lights from their top of their alimentary canal all the way down through. Do it for their liver, their pancreas, all of their internal organs. And then when all the lights are green, I'll tell them, okay, now put the automatic pilot switch back on and lock it on with everything in normal operating procedure. Now, is there a control room in your brain that looks like that? Absolutely not. But the kids are imagining it, and for them, it's true. And slowly but surely, things begin to level out and go back to normal. Um,
So they have to initially, and again, you're talking about children. They have to
mhm.
initially know about all the different components of what's inside them, right? And so do you do any kind of lessons while
Usually, their
consciousness?
doctors have done a lot of that.
Okay, okay.
And they're in their doctor's offices with those nice, pretty
Yeah,
posters with
right.
the whole digestive system outlined, and the
Yeah,
doctors are going, here's where your tummy is, and
yeah,
here's where your stomach is, and when your stomach is irritated, it causes this and this and that,
yeah.
and they've uh, particularly the nurse practitioner in the clinic did a lot of that kind of education. So again, by the time the kids got to me, they were loaded up. They
Okay.
and and especially working with teens, the teens pretty much knew what was going on, and what their bodies looked like inside. For the most part, I mean, it might have been sketchy, but they had some image. And the really beautiful thing is, I would tell the kids, you see a red light, you don't know how to have to know how to turn it green. You don't know what your brain's going to do, and all the thousands of cascading reactions that your brain's going to do to turn that red light green. You don't even have to know what that red light indicates. All you have to know is you've told your subconscious mind and your brain to put things back to normal, and that was good enough for them.
And
Uh,
so when they're doing that, when they're in their imagination doing this control room stuff, are their eyes closed
oh yeah,
typically? Okay.
typically yes. I will occasionally run into somebody who goes into a hypnotic state with their eyes wide open. Uh, here's a professional secret. One of the reasons that hypnotists tell people to close their eyes, well, there are two reasons. One, your eyes take about 30-40% of your thinking power. So if you close your eyes, you're getting a lot more brain power. But number two, it is really disconcerting to spend an hour and a half staring into the eyes of someone who is partly in another dimension. It is it is well one of my mentors um, one time said that when we have people in hypnosis, we are talking directly to their souls,
Mm, wow.
and that's the kind of look you get when people enter a deeply hypnotic state. Um, and it's it fortunately the hypnotist goes into hypnosis along with the client in a way, and
Okay.
so it's not as disconcerting as it would be if we were in our normal flight or fight mind. But
What's the youngest
it
patient you've treated?
six.
6. Okay.
The oldest was 17.
Right.
And I divided them into two groups. So I made two sets of tapes with language that was specific for younger and older kids.
So I'm imagining that not everyone can be put into a hypnotic state, right? And so
Not everyone goes into a hypnotic state and can go.
okay.
That doesn't mean I can hypnotize anybody or everybody.
All right. Are children
Uh,
easier?
oh, children are snap. They're just gone.
And
Uh,
do any of them come in with the, where's the pocket watch kind of thing? Do they come in with these preconceived notions of
Yeah,
what
they
you're going
do
to be
because they
doing?
Scooby Doo and other cartoons that kind of set them up to expect the Svengali kind of approach,
Yeah.
uh, but not so much as adults. One case I had was a gentleman who was, and I didn't know before I started. He was a member of a very fundamentalist church, and I can't even remember what he wanted to work on. He came in, I got him very relaxed. Um, His eyes were closed, his breathing was deep, his eyelids were fluttering, um, all signs of really good hypnosis. And then I made the mistake of saying, and you're now in a very nice state of hypnosis. And all of a sudden, he went into full blown panic mode, burst out of his quiet state. And I got him settled down, and it really was total panic. And what it turns out is that either his mother or his grandmother, I'm not sure which. Oh, I forgot to mention he was part of a very fundamentalist Christian sect
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Christian denomination. Someone in that denomination is in his family told him, "Don't ever let yourself be hypnotized because that's when the demons get into your soul."
That's work of the devil. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, he is bursting up in full blown terror that the demons are about to take over his mind. So no, I probably couldn't hypnotize him. Uh, Nonetheless,
Even though he came in specifically because he knew that you're a hypnotist
even
and
though,
he wanted to deal
yeah,
with the problem.
the
Okay.
memory was subconscious and the
Okay.
belief was subconscious. Uh,
Ah.
Another person came in and told me that she'd worked with one of my colleagues and that it was absolutely impossible to hypnotize her. Oh, let me back up one step.
All right. I was
That
gonna say
gentleman,
challenge accepted with that person, right?
yeah, oh yeah, that the gentleman who went into the panic attack, he was actually in a hypnotic state. He was totally hypnotized by his fear,
Oh,
and whoever had told him that had engaged his subconscious belief.
wow. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the young woman who calls me and says that my colleague, who's also a friend, absolutely could not get her into a hypnotic state. So I said, well, come on in. We'll see what we can do. And I had her sit down in my chair and recline it back. And I lifted her wrist up and gently set it down, coordinated with her breathing. On the third breath, she was in deep hypnosis, almost what we call an Isdale state, where you're not even totally conscious. We did our work, came up, and I asked her, well, what happened with my colleague? And she says, well, I didn't want to say anything to him, but he had his dog in the office, and he had this adorable little pet schnauzer,
Oh,
the sweetest, smallest dog you can imagine. This woman had a dog phobia. She
oh my
didn't think to
gosh.
mention it to him.
Oh my
Every time he
gosh.
told her to close her eyes,
She was afraid.
she went into a total fear state. And my colleague absolutely couldn't hypnotize her. He didn't have the right information. Uh, but she was one of the easiest clients I've ever had. Uh, so yes, anybody can go into hypnosis. Not every hypnotist can hypnotize every person. Um,
Yeah. So have you yourself gone to other hypnotists to be
oh,
hypnotized?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely. Yeah, it's continuing education for one thing, and in um, in my apprenticeship training, I had to do a lot of working with my fellow students to go practice going in and out of hypnosis, and I continue to see some of them over time. Um, when I started teaching hypnosis myself, one of the requirements that my co-teacher and I had for our students is they had to hypnotize us, which was a totally intimidating and scary thing for them. We did it deliberately because of that.
Okay.
And once they got past that, we knew they were on track. So yes, I've worked a lot, and worked on a lot of kind of deep issues, cleaning up the past. Um,
And I'll get into that a little bit with your other book, but right now we're talking, for those of you just joining us, we're talking with Robert Hughes and his book Hypnosis for Children with IBS and Tummy Aches. So in this book, you provide scripts
yes.
for people. Why do you do that? Now, part of me was thinking, if somebody else makes your peanut butter and jelly sandwich for you, it's much better than if you make it
Uh-huh.
yourself. Is it the same kind of thing with, having someone else do the hypnosis rather than trying to hypnotize yourself? Because, there are some in here that is like, oh, I could do this myself, but would I?
Absolutely.
Why do you provide the scripts?
Uh, One, I don't believe that knowledge should be hoarded.
Okay, I like that.
I I want people doing this work. One of my dreams would be to see a hypnotherapist in every office of every healthcare provider who deals with pain in any way whatsoever. Um, so I'd like to multiply what I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely don't want to keep secret. When I learned hypnosis, my two instructors had a very successful stop smoking program, which they would not share with their students.
Oh,
They said, develop your own. Uh, that's not my approach. My approach is here's everything I know, take it,
yeah.
use it, duplicate it, go out and do good with it. Uh, so that's part of the reason. Another part of the reason is because one of the audiences for that book was physicians. And I wanted physicians to be able to look at that and see what was going on
Okay.
with their patients. Now, when I saw their patients, I was not reading those scripts word for word. Those were the ones that I recorded to
Okay.
send home on CD with them. But in the office session, uh, I might follow the general outline that I laid out. I think I gave you a four-step protocol, and a lot of the things that would come up would be within that framework. But one of the first rules of hypnosis is work with what comes up. So uh, one favorite example is I had a young man named Richard who was the uh, son of a Hispanic physician. His brother, his older brother, was the family star football player, star athlete, star scholar. Richard was just kind of an average kid under extreme stress in his high performing family. His mom was also a scientist and also Hispanic. And so as I'm working with Richard, one of the things that I did was teach them a technique called magic hands, where I would have them put their hands over the part that hurt and just imagine energy flowing in, kind of like
Yeah.
Reiki for those who
Yeah.
are
Yeah. Hmm.
familiar with the technique.
Yes.
And I'd tell them as long as your hands were there, your pain would go away. And so Richard was doing this, and he had been in pain, and his pain started to diminish. Well, I hear a snuffle in the background, and I look over to Mom, who's in the room with us, and she's tears are just running down her face. And so I kind of stopped things for a minute and said, Richard, you just relax here and take a nice vacation. I want to talk to your mom a minute. Well, Mom told me that she was crying because she'd forgotten so many things in her rush to become a Western scientist or an American scientist, rational scientist. She said, my grandmother was a curandera,
You're a
essentially a faith
medicine woman,
healer.
or yeah.
Yeah, in Mexico, and she said, my grandmother used to tell us, if anything hurts, you put your hands over it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next step then was to go back to Richard and signal his mom to come closer and tell Richard, now put your hands back there. And this time I want your mom to put her hands over your hands.
Oh.
And then the hypnotic suggestion was anytime that your mom puts her hands over yours or your dad puts his hands over yours, it magnifies the pain relieving effect 1,000 times.
Wow.
Do I know what 1,000 times is? I have
No.
no idea.
Right. Right.
Richard's subconscious did.
Gonna
I
make me
only
teary
saw him.
thinking about that. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
I only saw him 2 sessions. He didn't have to come back. And his mom
Wow.
wrote me a note saying, "I've got my cheerful little boy back." And um, those are the kinds of things that just warm your heart. But it's that came out of part of my subconscious mind paying attention to what was going on in the room, saying, "Wake up, Robert! Pay attention. This is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now do something with it."
So is your work still being done in places? Did you have apprentices?
I turned all of my work over um, to one client in Boise, and unfortunately she passed, but not before turning it over to another therapist. And as far as I know, Jessica is still practicing with that clinic. Um, I have made attempts with several other pediatric gastroenterologists to interest them in me working with them or or training someone to work with it. Mostly, they have not been receptive. Um,
Wow. With
the
your
the
success
worst
rate, holy mackerel.
the worst of them was a gentleman who was the chair of the Department of Pediatric Gastroenterology at the Medical College of Virginia, and I won't say his name, but his initials were Jerk. Um,
Oh,
and
wow.
he put me on the spot with all kinds of physiology questions that I really only vaguely knew answers to. And then he had a couple of his colleagues who really wanted me to work with their office. He put the kibosh on that and then told me this needs more research. I
Ugh.
said, I'll have your research protocol within a week. The next day, I delivered a fully fleshed out research protocol, complete with budget. Actually, it was the next working day. I saw him Friday, so it was a Monday. I had that on his desk. Uh, Dr. Jerk never got back to me,
Ah,
not even to say thank
ah.
you very much for your effort. And that is more typically the reaction I get. Either either this is charlatanism, or I don't know anything about this, so I don't know how to evaluate it, and
Or
I
it would
don't.
take away from my knowledge and
Yeah,
my ability
I,
to
that
cure or whatever.
I didn't
Ego,
get
right?
that as much. No, I didn't
Yeah.
get that as much as
Uh,
just we don't know anything about this, so I can't, in good conscience, recommend it to patients, or it's it's charlatanism.
okay.
And
Yeah.
I
That's
had
too
a
bad.
friend in Boise, and I cannot use his name in case he's still practicing. He's a neurologist who was also a trained hypnotist. He never told any of his colleagues that he was trained as a hypnotist because he thought that they would quit referring patients to him. Uh, and some of
That's
that
sad.
is, I think that was really unwarranted fear,
Yeah.
but fear runs a lot of doctors' lives,
Hmm. Mm.
uh,
Yeah.
and it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
Uh,
So Robert Hughes, you have after I read your book Hypnosis for Children with IBS and Tummy Aches, I went online and I found your book Seasons of the Heart. And I just want to say that I've been reading this almost every night. They're essays, and you use the seasons and kind of your thoughts, whatever comes to your mind. And I'm reading one or two a night before I go to sleep, before my subconscious takes over. And they're really beautiful, and they I don't they mean something to me. I mean, you're so I'm up to January. I'm up to your
that's an
January at the
amazing
beach.
compliment with an eye.
Huh?
The beach.
Oh,
Oh,
January at the beach. And the idea of the stones that are constantly rolling in the surf. I just dropped a book. And rubbing up against each other and becoming smooth. And you use that as a metaphor for us, people, always bumping into one another and smoothing off rough edges and all that kind of stuff. And you talk about ego in here, and you're very honest about yourself in a lot of these essays and the struggles that you've gone through and how you come out of those. So I just want to talk about I just want to mention this book to our listeners out there that it's really lovely and you're obviously very spiritual too. And I think that even people who aren't um, aren't any particular religion will still get something from these essays. So I wanted to
and I'm
thank
not
you
any
for these.
particular religion either. So, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so
That what's there's a question in there.
well, I was gonna say how, what made you finally, I mean, there are a lot of essays in here. I'm not done yet, but what made you decide to put them all together in this book, Seasons of the Heart?
Uh,
And are you still working on essays? Is there going to be another one?
no, not so much.
Not so much. This is everything that you need to say.
Probably. I have arthritic hands, which makes typing something of a chore now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I haven't had the drive and impulse that I need to sit down and overcome inherent laziness and actually work on something. Uh, but
Well, what you've done, and you don't even need to make up any other excuses. I was gonna say what you've done is beautiful, and
thank you.
I would say it's comprehensive, and the fact that you go through seasons and each of those, I don't think anyone could read through this and not relate to many of your
Yeah,
stories. They're
and
beautiful.
most of those were written in the '90s and into the very early aughts. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm
So
worried
there.
that may be a little dated, but the one
No.
on the beach, for example, was relating an experience that happened in 1988.
Mhm. Anyway,
And
that's where I am right now, and I love it. And so I want everybody to get that book, and I'm going to have links to your books below here.
oh,
So,
thank you.
Robert,
Let me
do
just,
you have any any advice to parents who might have youngsters with issues? What advice would you give them? Because I don't
um,
think they can come see you anymore.
No, I'm pretty retired.
Yeah.
I would advise them to, if it's a physiological problem, to see a physician and then consider asking a hypnotist if they can help. Um, if it's emotional issues, if they've already seen psychologists, to perhaps consider working with a hypnotist. Um, I I think that there are some, not as many as there used to be, but some poorly trained hypnotists. And since there's uh, no licensure law in most states and not much in the way of educational guidelines,
Yeah. The
as far as
vetting.
I know,
Yeah.
there are no university programs in hypnosis. It becomes kind of a question of making sure you feel comfortable as a parent with that hypnotist. Um, if a hypnotist will not allow a parent to sit in the room with a minor child, uh,
Red flag.
run, don't walk.
Red flag. Right.
Yeah, it is a
Right.
major red flag. Um, not that it's indicative necessarily of um,
Any
any kind
doctor.
of
I would
abuse.
say,
Yeah,
yeah. I would say any
but
doctor who would not allow
yeah,
that.
it's
Yeah.
just maybe reflective of an overinflated ego in the hypnotist, uh, but not someone you want your kid working with.
Right.
Uh, you. I want to go back one step.
Sure.
You were referencing me being on something of a spiritual person. What I want to say is that my innate belief is that every human being is on a spiritual journey, whether we realize it or not. It's not something we get a choice in. We are spirits traveling through a physical form, and so everybody's journey is a spiritual journey, and there's nothing inherently better about mine than anybody else's.
I love that, and that's a beautiful note to end on. Robert Hughes, thank you so much. Listeners out there, get his books. I have links below. And if any of you would like to have a conversation with me, let me know. Email me. I'll have my email below as well. And
And especially the first book,
especially the
unlocking
first book, which I dropped. Hang on.
unlocking the blueprint of the psyche. Oh, you have that?
Oh, no, no, no. Oh,
No,
your third book.
no. My first published book was called Unlocking the Blueprint of the Psyche. About
Okay.
60 pages of it are about the same as the first 60 pages of that,
Okay.
but it teaches self hypnosis, and it teaches a very elegant method of doing self hypnosis.
Oh, I need to get that.
It's and it's probably only available in electronic format.
Okay.
I
Oh, it's
uh,
funny. It's funny. You reminded me of something when you talked about sending CDs home. Why wouldn't you now have a YouTube channel where you could do things like we're doing
because
now?
I'm technologically incompetent. The closest I could come was sending people home with flash drives,
Well,
which
you
is what
made
I
it onto
graduated to.
you made it onto my show today, and so props to you, Robert
Well, that
Hughes.
was a near thing.
Thank you again, and I
Thank
hope
you,
we can
Laurel.
have more chats at the dog park. So
That
um,
sounds like a plan.
get Robert's books, and thank you for listening, and we'll catch you later.